So what if Naruto and Orochimaru had Miracle Child in DxD movie? Ah, wonderful to finally be able to see you, face to face, my dear Ajuka-kun. It's very nice to meet you as well, and not communicate through messages, Orochimaru-san. Two men faced each other across large screens, with speakers and microphones to allow them to see, hear, and speak to each other. Both were handsome and youthful-looking men. One was a very pale and snake-like man, and behind him on the screen were various vats filled with unconscious human bodies, with tubes that were connected to a machine directly behind him. Ajuka had a different machine. I see you built the cloning machine very similar to how I instructed you, but you've made some adjustments to it. Very well, still, it is very good to see my theory worked. Orochimaru licked his lips as he looked at the man's lab and the different research materials that were inside of it. The two of them were separated by more than just screens. They were separated by dimensions. Orochimaru had been researching dimensional travel and messages, so he coded messages and sent them across any dimensions he could. It took huge amounts of raw power to do, but eventually he got a return message. That was exactly what he wanted, to get a message from a person with enough intelligence to decode his message and learn the formulas that he used to send his message. Orochimaru had then instructed that person on how to create cloning vats that could create clones capable of acting as batteries for the dimensional viewing machine. Ajuka, on the other hand, was a little nervous. At first. I think 3 years ago, I got a message from a man in another world, and now I'm speaking with him face to face, a scientist from another world who has cracked the code to immortality and has developed high-tech cloning technologies. I might just be speaking to one of the smartest beings I've ever seen. Ajuka had never met an intellect that surpassed him before. The guy on the other side of the screen was that guy. He blinked when Orochimaru sent him a file. It was coded. The file Orochimaru sent him was huge, absolutely massive in scope. There were 2 billion base codes in the file that Orochimaru had sent to him. Ah, this is the code for cloning. Who is this? Ajuka asked when he realized that he had been sent a complete genetic structure for a creature from Orochimaru's world. It was extremely complex, but when he noticed a pattern to it, he figured out what Orochimaru had sent him. It also made sense to him on multiple levels when he noticed the clones in the tanks behind Orochimaru all had similar looks. Is this the code for the human who you cloned and are using as a battery to power your device? Ajuka asked. Orochimaru nodded. Yes, that is payment, thank you Ajuka-kun, you've given me quite a lot of information, Orochimaru stated, and Ajuka noticed that the man had hacked into all of his records. All of them had been hacked and copied like it was nothing. Instead of being angry, he was confused and impressed. Payment for stolen information. Not stolen, I consider this information to be my reward for teaching you. I am paying you for proving my theory of intelligent life in other dimensions correct. Orochimaru had proved his theory and now had evidence to show. I left out a very important piece of code for that human. Any clone you make of him will fail and die. I wish to see if you are able to find a way to keep a clone of him alive and stable with a human form. Orochimaru wanted to test the man. Ajuka looked at the code and ran a program on it. It came back negative. This code is complete. This is a complete human code. Ajuka didn't see anything at all missing from this code. It is complete by the standards of humans in your world, but for humans in my world, that DNA sequence is missing a vital component. Can you figure it out? Orochimaru asked Ajuka. A test. This is a reward and a test. That DNA belongs to the greatest warrior of my world, the hero who ended a world war and brought salvation to my war-torn world. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. Currently, I am using one clone of him to power the device that allows me to speak with you now. There are 30 clones of him in that room. Ajuka didn't believe it. You aren't the only being I am speaking with. I am currently speaking with 29 other dimensions and having them all work on the same cloning technology. If you can modify that clone to make it stable, good for you. It shows that you are intelligent enough to be gifted with a great power. I will be ending out communication here. Keep me updated, Orochimaru stated. Ajuka watched as the screen went black. Orochimaru hung up. -5 years later. Failures. This is insane. What am I missing? What is missing here? I have cloned and cloned and cloned. I've been doing nothing but trying so many ways to clone him and modify his DNA to allow him to survive. But nothing is working. Ajuka was driving himself insane as he kept working. Nothing worked. Something was missing. Orochimaru had not lied. There was something so vital to Naruto's DNA that it was coded as needed in his DNA. He didn't know what it was though. He needed to figure it out and modify it so that the clone didn't need it and then replace it. The clones couldn't survive and they provided no power. Their bodies had no energy to use at all. Which meant that whatever it was that was needed was what allowed them to power Orochimaru's technology. So Ajuka was going over the code again. Seeing code for a powerful human vitality. Whoever has this code in them should be able to survive even life-threatening injuries and recover quickly. So what is missing that is so vital? Ajuka was on his 6th cup of coffee of the morning because he had been up for 3 days in a row at this point working. He would work for several days, sleep and recover, and then work even more. This was a real challenge. He loved it. Cracking this code had been the scientific challenge of a lifetime, a challenge he was happily devoting all of his free time towards. He had tried changing the human code into a devil code to seeing what would happen, but the cloning process still wasn't stable. Even when he replaced human code with devil code, the outcome couldn't survive because something vital really was missing. To succeed, he needed to remove the part of the code that said, "This is vital for survival," and replace it with a code for "This is not needed," but he still needed to figure out what was missing before he could rewrite it so that it wasn't required. He had tried using DNA from all the remaining pillar families to see if any of them could overwrite that. The DNA he was working with was amazing. The DNA of the humans from Orochimaru's world had the ability to assimilate other DNA forms into their own and gain powers from it. The more compatible the DNA source was, the greater the effect that the power gain was. What was more was the fact that the DNA could also result in killing the host if they were severely incompatible. The humans of Orochimaru's world seemed to be living and breathing natural chimeras. He broke it down further. Hair colors. Blonde and red colors. Violet and blue skin colors. Peach and pale. As of now, the most compatible DNA mutation sources had some combination of all of those features. The Phoenix family, the Gremory family, and the Chrysel family were those that had some combination of those traits in their DNA. The strongest DNA ability to gain would be the Phoenix, but he just didn't have access to a member of that family willing to have their DNA used for the cloning. The Chrysel family was nearly extinct, and while he could use the Gremory family to change the human DNA into devil DNA, the most pure version of that blood was from a member of the family that was currently sleeping. Orochimaru, that bastard, he really did give me the ultimate challenge. Ajuka looked at a cloning vat that had a floating young boy inside of it, hooked up on a life support system. Rapid clone aging was put into place, so in less than 3 days a clone would be given the body of a 3-year-old child. Then, it would either succeed or fail. It took him 2 days just to change the code he was working with. Each time he made an adjustment, and he was trying everything possible. Orochimaru had not once contacted him in the 5 years since he started his test, since the man made it obvious that completing the clone was a requirement for any further communication to occur. Ajuka loved it. This was how it should be, a test so great that it seemed like it would be impossible. Minus 20 years later. It was hopeless. Nothing worked. That bastard, he lied to me. The DNA code has to be faulty. I've tried thousands of times to mutate this DNA to allow it to survive, and nothing has worked. Ajuka looked at the 9 corpses that were floating in the cloning vats, the current 9 clones that were taken off of life support to see if they were stable enough to survive. He tried 9 different coding changes in them. But none of them worked. He even managed to get the DNA from Runia's Gremory. She had woken up for a little bit, and he convinced her that it would be fun if he used her DNA in order to modify a human clone, to make it a devil clone instead. He had the most pure Gremory DNA, from a red-haired violet-eyed, peach-skinned woman who had the greatest genetic compatibility with the source DNA he was working with. Nothing worked. 25 years he had wasted on an impossible task, with nothing to show for it, but having watched his children die thousands of times, each clone he made was his child, the work he made, and as time went on he kept putting all of his hopes into each and every clone. He wished they would survive. He wanted nothing more than for them to be successes. He put his heart and soul into each and every clone. And they all failed. He had buried all of the clones and given them proper cremations, because they were all his children. Nothing worked. He had been brought to tears of frustration countless of times at this point from the stress all the deaths had started to cost him. During the first 10 years he could just call a clone a failure and move on, but after that he started to get desperate. The process of creating life and watching it die over and over again was cracking his sanity at times. For his own mental health, he needed to surrender. He just needed to label the test impossible for his skills to complete, forget about the other dimension, and spend a decade or 2 recovering from his failures. Ajuka stood up and walked towards the end of the room. Sorry sons, I'll be back in a few days too. Yeah, I'll be with your siblings. Ajuka couldn't stay in the room anymore. He turned off the lights and started to make his way out. Ajuka left the room. Crack. Minus 2 days later. Ajuka hated that he was about to enter his lab again for the first time in 2 days, but it was time to collect the failed clones from their tanks, cremate them, and give them the final burials that he hoped to ever do for his children. He turned the lights on. Who was in here? Ajuka felt instant rage. One of the cloning vats was broken, and the fluid was all across the floor with the clone that had been inside of it being nowhere. Ajuka ran into the room in an utter rage and looked around for any signs of somebody breaking into his lab and stealing the bodies of one of the clones he worked so hard to fail at. He felt anger that he had never felt in his entire life. Somebody fucked with the corpse of one of his children. Time to see what bastard did this. Ajuka immediately went to the security footage. He watched it. Rage started to leave his body. The crack had appeared in the glass of the cloning vat, and a few hours after he had left the room, the clone had a small surge of magical power that shattered the tank. He watched as the security footage showed him the clone being dumped out of the vat and onto the floor. The clone was bleeding, but it would seem by some miracle the clone had something amazing. The sacred gear. The clone activated that sacred gear by instinct and started to heal itself before crawling across the floor for a place to recover. Oh shit. Ajuka ran across the room. He grabbed a table in the middle of the room and flipped it to reveal the clone on the ground curled up in the fetal position. He dropped to his knees and saw 2 silver rings, a ring on each hand to show the clone had twilight healing, a very rare sacred gear, a healing one that only had a few active wielders at any given time. He grabbed the clone and brought his ear to his chest. Nothing. Dump. The faint heartbeat. Success, success, I succeeded, my son, you're alive, Naruto, sweet little Naruto, my beautiful baby boy. Ajuka was hugging the clone to his chest with tears in his eyes. The boy was unconscious, but had a strong magical power deep inside of him. He had failed to make the boy fully devil like he intended, but he could feel devil power in him. A miracle. The boy was half human, which allowed him the rare chance to be born with a sacred gear, and it would seem that as luck would have it, that sacred gear might have been what stabilized the clone. When he changed the DNA code, the other clones in the tanks were all dead still, so none of them had awakened a sacred gear out of the thousands of clones he had made. This was the very first clone that had signs of a sacred gear at all. Good work Ajuka, you removed the clone's requirement to need chakra for survival. The screen changed to show Orochimaru. Huh? The humans in my world have Kai, spirit energy, and chakra in our bodies, but chakra is required for our survival. I removed the traces of code for chakra in his DNA, so any clone would fail to have chakra, but I left the code that required chakra for survival. You managed to find a method to work around this, good work on your success. Orochimaru was clapping his hands together to show he felt proud of Ajuka's success in creating his own version of Naruto. Orochimaru looked at the code. He then frowned. Well, this was a flute, but you still managed a success, very well, I'll send you the correct DNA code with all of the code. No, I don't want it, Orochimaru, I'm done working with you, leave me and my son alone. Ajuka cradled the boy in his arms. His creation. Oh? This isn't just a clone, this is my son, and I'm done working together with you, thank you for teaching me so much and showing me how much I have to learn, but you're toxic to me, I've spent the last 25 years of my life working towards your test and it has caused me untold harm, I'm done. Ajuka wasn't going to work with Orochimaru anymore. No matter how tempting the offer may seem to be. Very well, but you may always contact me if you change your mind, but just know, if you do, I will demand a heavy price from you. I won't ever contact you. Ajuka was done, come on, let's get you to a proper bed. Ajuka touched his child's face gently. Orochimaru's smile sickened him now. His son's sleeping face put him at peace though. It's only been 2 years since his birth and Hess already getting the hang of magic. Ajuka watched as his son shot a fireball out of his hand and hit a moving target with it with enough force that the fireball exploded with the force of a grenade going off. He reached down and rubbed the top of his son's head since he succeeded in a good-sized and speed fireball. The Gremory DNA in him. Genetically, Gremory clan devils had a natural talent towards mastering basic magic abilities. They possessed no unique magic of their own, which was why they were a low-ranked family among the 72 pillar families, but they had an immense talent when it came to using their talents for combat. They could learn new spells quickly and master basic magic faster than most other devils could. Dad. Yes son, you did good, Ajuka affirmed as Naruto pointed at the blown target. He smiled with pride. He took a knee next to his son and he grabbed another target, a frisbee, and flung it across the yard. Try water this time. Zop. Wrong magic. Sorry. It's okay, we can work on water magic together some other day. Ajuka was still smiling when Naruto fired off the wrong element and shot a bolt of lightning. He didn't hit the target with it at all, and the bolt struck a statue in the yard instead. The statue's head had been knocked clear off of its body, but it could be fixed very easily. He continued to rub the top of his son's head. Since the bolt of lightning had some good potency to it. He was 2 years old, with the body of a 5-year-old child, but he developed mentally quickly to match his physical age. This was only Naruto's second month of magic lessons, and he was already capable of making decent use of both fire and lightning magics, basic spells. Still, he had a magic power inside of him that was boosted by his lineage. He had a deep and untapped well of power inside of him. He had a large amount of raw magic, thanks to where he got his devil heritage from. And the human half of him seemed to only work well with that half. It was interesting. I want to work more though. Don't worry, we can work more on magic another day, let's not push it. Ijuka stood up and grabbed Naruto's hand, pulling him along. He frowned when he thought more on it, he had worries, he didn't want Naruto to push himself and get hurt during training. It was possible that if he pushed himself too hard, his mixed heritage could turn him into a super devil, and the surge of power could end up causing his body to become unstable. He didn't even know how stable Naruto truly was at the moment. The immense latent potential that his DNA gave him was always a worry for him because it could easily threaten his life. He gulped. Dad. Yes. Ijuka pulled himself from his depressing thoughts and smiled down. He saw his son was looking towards the statue he broke. I'm sorry. It's okay, you like practicing magic, accidents happen sometimes, statues can be replaced. Ijuka smiled more gently when he saw just how bad his son felt about breaking the statue. He would have the maids of the mansion fix the statue. Oh, I almost forgot, I have a meeting with your uncle Surziches and the others tomorrow, they are bringing their younger siblings, Ijuka stated. Changing the subject. Surziches Lucifer and Seraphol Leviathan both had younger siblings, and the two of them were as old as Naruto's physical age. He wanted to finally report his findings on other dimensions to the other Satans, which he had kept secret for years, as a personal favor to him. He did ask the other Satans who had younger siblings to bring those siblings. He did ask Falbium not to bring his troublemaker of a family member along though, since he didn't want his son to pick up any bad traits from anyone. Uncle Sir is coming? Naruto asked with lit up eyes. Technically, you're his great-great-great-great-great-granduncle, Ijuka mentally joked to himself. Naruto had blonde hair and blue eyes, but the fact was that the only reason he was a half-devil was because of the Gremory DNA code that was installed into him before his creation. Naruto was old enough that he needed to start interacting with kids his own age. Even though he was only 2 years old, the story to the Devil Realm was that he was 5 years old and due to health concerns he had been kept a secret for his entire life. He didn't exactly want it to be known that his son was a clone after all. As it stood, only Rinia's Gremory and his fellow Satans knew that Naruto was a clone. Not even the maids of his mansion knew the circumstances behind Naruto's unique birth. Naruto didn't even know he was a clone. Dad, are you okay? You feel bad. It's nothing for you to worry about. Ijuka just didn't want to have to kill anyone who tried to hurt Naruto for being a clone was all. He would kill anyone who he couldn't trust that found out his secret. It was not public knowledge that he had cloned his son, and nobody was allowed to enter the graveyard where he kept all his other son's ashes. Ijuka gulped and took a deep calming breath. Before he smiled and squeezed his son's little hand. His living success. His only surviving child out of the thousands of corpses he created, and he wasn't going to let anything bad happen to this boy of his. Later. They get along at least, Seraphol stated with crossed arms. She looked out the window down at the children playing together in the courtyard of the mansion, looking at the clone child with a more critical eye. She glanced over at Ijuka before she sighed and nodded her head slowly. And you're sure he isn't some biological bomb this Orochimaru guy gave you that can blow up at any second? Seraphol did not trust it. Why would anyone freely give the DNA code of their greatest warrior to somebody as a mere test, unless they had some other kind of secret agenda? Ijuka hadn't talked to Orochimaru in 2 years, and the man never contacted him either. Surziches was watching the children play as well, but he just seemed happy. Even if he was some kind of weapon, I trust Ijuka with him. If he says Naruto is safe, then he's safe, and he seems like a fun-loving child. Surziches had some more experience with a young boy than Seraphol did, which was why he brought his sister along to meet the boy. Seeing them playing a simple game of tag with each other in the yard proved to him the boy could be trusted to be one of their kind. Falbium just remained silent, with his eyes closed as he thought about everything he had been informed about. Can we trust that Orochimaru didn't give you some kind of, you said he was creepy, Hess a cute kid, but for all we know Hess a biological bomb, but I guess he does get along with Sotan. Seraphol couldn't deny that as she watched the kids play together, it was impossible for her to keep her suspicions about the child himself up for long. All she could worry about was the Snake Man. Orochimaru was a true neutral scientist, he simply wanted to test me, he gave me a challenge, to see if I could be his equal in the field of science. He treats us all as test subjects, not just us, but other dimensions. We're more valuable to him alive, as he watches us for his amusement. Ijuka didn't trust Orochimaru, but he could tell that as a scientist himself. Observing living creatures gave much more information than simply studying dead ones. Falbium opened an eye and looked at Ijuka before thinking about what he was going to say, closing his eyes all the way once more and frowning deeper. According to Ijuka, the boy could become a super devil like me or him if he tapped into his latent power. Right now his magical power is only slightly smaller than Ria's power. Surziches placed a hand on the window. He looked at the children playing. The fact the boy was only 2 years old magically, but was only slightly behind Ria's, who had 5 years of life to develop her magic, showed that he had a great potential. Magic power naturally got stronger over time until a devil was a fully fledged adult. Once a devil was adult, their power stopped increasing with age and could only increase with training. A young devil usually got the greatest jumps in strength when they were still developing. He and Ajuka were done growing their own strength now that they were fully fledged adults. If both Rias and Naruto never trained another day in their life, the two of them would still become powerful high-class devils, but Naruto would become slightly stronger than Rias just by having better genetics. If they trained, better yet if they trained together, they could push each other to greater heights than if either of them just let their power develop naturally. He is a human clone, so why is he a devil child? Falbium finally asked. I used Surzich's ancestor Rinia's DNA to change his DNA, Hess half-human, and Hess got a twilight healing in him. Hess a good child Falbium, he isn't a threat to us. Ajuka wanted his friend to understand, he could see where Falbium was coming from. Don't treat my son like an enemy. He isn't your son though. Shut up Falbium, that boy is Ajuka's son, they might not share blood, but he put his heart and soul into making him. Surzich's became serious in that very moment, he extended his arm to stop Ajuka, but Ajuka didn't seem as angry as he should be at the comment. He was confused at Ajuka's lack of anger for a second. Ajuka was nodding. He is my son Falbium, but I won't argue with you. Actually, I think most people would agree with you, Seraphol. You've been quiet for a while. Ajuka noticed that Seraphol had gone back to observing the children. Her hand was against the window and sighed when she was addressed. She pushed her forehead against the glass. She didn't like what she was about to say. They'll trust you Ajuka, Seraphol sighed deeper. She turned her back away from the children. We all knew he was a clone, but to think we might be helping some otherworld evil get his claws into our world, it's a scary though isn't it? Seraphol believed everything would be so much easier if they could just kill the child and be done with it. The child was innocent though, and seeing him play with her sister pulled at her heartstrings tightly. She was seeing how innocent he was, and she couldn't bring herself to suggest they kill the child when there was little proof he would do anything evil. I'm taking care of that, Ajuka stated. I believe in you, Surzich's confirmed with a smile. How are you taking care of it? Falbium asked, since as much as he wanted to believe in Ajuka, nothing he said would make him trust in the man from the other dimension. I've already assigned Naruto his queen. When he gets his peerage, his queen will keep an eye on him, and if he shows any signs of being tampered with, Shess inform me and I'll take him right to my lab and remove any tampering. Ajuka had contacted the woman he wanted to watch over Naruto as a queen and made a very enticing deal with her. Ooh. Roigun Belphegor. Wait a second, you mean the woman that was caught cheating during the rating games and literally stripped of her rank and status? Seraphol reacted very strongly because Ajuka just listed a woman who used to be almost as strong as herself. The woman had Satan-class powers, but when it was found out she was cheating during rating games, her powers were discovered to actually only be high-class in status. It wasn't told to the public how she was cheating though. How do you think she was caught cheating? I will do anything for my son Seraphol, even play dirty. I confiscated her king piece, and she is now working here as a maid. Turns out, her family was not very fond of her cheating and bringing shame to them. Ajuka had sought out anyone who he could use in order to keep his son safe in the future. The powerful queen for his peerage was a great gain. She's been stripped of the right to participate in rating games unless she is somebody else's piece. Oof, Surzich's winced. Roigun was a rating games freak, she loved them, so that was a hell of a way to make her compliant with any demand you wanted from her. She has a powerful information network. With it, my son can get a powerful peerage that can keep him in check if anything goes wrong. If he surrounds himself with powerful allies, he won't need to rely on his latent potential, and his chances of becoming a super devil are lower, correct? Ajuka asked Falbium. Finally, the man nodded in agreement. If his peerage is powerful enough to keep him in check, then I agree, we will have less to worry about. Fine, I support you. Falbium was willing to allow Ajuka's plans to slide. How did you catch Roigun cheating? Falbium asked when he realized that. Roigun was the second place champion of the rating games. I want to get my hands on all 9 king pieces again. If something happens, or if Orochimaru does something, we might need them. I discovered she was using a king piece to cheat, as simple as that. Now I have 4 of my 9 king pieces. Ajuka sighed in relief when he noticed that everyone listening to him was satisfied with his answer. The king pieces had the power to boost a devil's magical power between 10 and 100 times its usual level when it was in use. Of course, the stronger you were the more dangerous it could be for you to use them, since the power surge could kill you if you were too strong. If Ajuka or Surzich's used a king piece, they had a high chance of losing all control and just dying from it. Seraphol and Falbium had similar odds of dying if they tried to use a piece for themselves too. You've been busy, these last 27 years have been hard on you, Surzich's pat his shoulder. 25 years of failed cloning, and now 2 years of hard work to keep his son safe, had to be murder on his mental state. Worth all the trouble, Ajuka confirmed for him. He would do anything for his child. This was who Naruto would prefer to join his peerage. As a 10-year-old boy, with the queen of his peerage having already been chosen for him, he figured he wanted the rest of his peerage to be people that he convinced to join. He would have help from his queen to search for people, since she had an impressive network of informants who could tell him of humans with potential. Now that he was 10, he was visiting the human world with his queen. Roygun Belphegor, an extra demon who had been exiled from her family when his father revealed that she was cheating during her raiding games, her peerage had been removed from her control, her titles had been stripped of her, and she worked as a maid for him. She was bodacious and looked like a woman in her 20s, with cherry blossom pink hair and horns unlike most devils. The rule was for him to travel to the human realm, she needed to be by his side. 2 rooks with enhanced strength and durability, 2 knights with enhanced speed and agility, 2 bishops with enhanced magical power, 8 pawns with the promotion ability. This was what he had to work with, meaning that he could get 14 more people to join his peerage, even less if he used more than one piece to turn any particular person. Currently, he was in England. He wanted to fill the important roles of his peerage first, and behind the queen, the rooks were the most important roles due to them being powerful tanks. They were each worth 5 pawns in sheer value, while bishops and knights were worth 3 each. It was why he had a list of people provided to him by Roygun. Master. Naruto. Master. Roygun was still wearing her maid dress, and she refused to address him by just his name. He sighed, but waved his hand for her to continue. My intel shows that the human with potential, your Briar, is part of an elite group of assassins known as Garden. Briar, a woman named Briar works for Garden. Hehehe, that's super fitting. Naruto walked through the very garden that they were in. There were humans around them who had collapsed to the ground out of their hiding spots. The sleep spell. Test 1. Be able to resist sleeping magic. He didn't want somebody who had no magical resistance at all to join his peerage. If they managed to resist magic as a human, then when they were turned into a devil they would resist it even more. A rook needed to have great resistances anyway, so for him to consider a human with potential, they needed to have stuff that set them apart. And it seems that this might not be that group, Roygun finished. She raised her hand and created a magic circle when she felt killing intent, and a fist slammed right into her defensive spell. She looked behind her and saw the target was behind them. She was still awake and had managed to sneak up on them very well. She couldn't hide the killing intent the moment she made the attack though. First test passed, second test, Naruto looked at the woman. He raised a hand and a cloud of gas engulfed the woman. She jumped out of the cloud and landed on top of one of the trees in the garden, coughing from having inhaled what Naruto created. What kind of? Oh? Naruto was interested when she didn't pass out from the poison cloud he used on her. It would seem that she had a powerful resistance to deadly poisons as well, meaning she passed the third test. Even Roygun covered her mouth to prevent herself from breathing any of the gas until it passed. He wanted her because he figured an assassin would be able to pass his tests for rookhood. "Are your Briar, the Thorn Princess, right?" Naruto asked the woman. What are you?" Yor corrected herself when she saw the woman stand between herself and the boy again, and how the woman had horns on her head. Rude, Roygun smiled a little. She raised her hand to throw a magic attack at Yor to see how she would react, but instantly switched to barrier magic again when Yor threw a small weapon at her. Crick. Eh? Huh? Naruto watched as well as the weapon cracked the magical barrier slightly with the pure force behind how it was thrown. Magic barriers, true, were more made to deal with magical attacks and not physical ones, but they could still be used to block physical attacks as well, for the weapon to crack the barrier. That meant that it needed to have at least the same amount of force behind it as an anti-tank rifle. Yor jumped when the tree she was standing on came to life and tried to restrain her, flipping through the air and catching her weapon that had bounced off the magical barrier. I won't allow anyone to threaten the garden. Yor ran at them. With inhuman speed. Master, she is human right, because Roygun created a barrier to cover both herself and Naruto, and Yor kicked the barrier with the same amount of force as her thrown weapon. Her kick cracked the barrier as well. It took inhuman levels of strength to do that. Pretty sure humans shouldn't be as strong as devils like us. Roygun had not done her research as well as she thought she had. The average devil was as strong as a peak human athlete. The fact was that Yor was above the average devil by quite a lot, purely because she was physically cracking a magical barrier. She evaded magic with surprising skill and agility, and she showed a near immunity to poison and the willpower needed to resist sleeping magic. The woman was only a 20-year-old human. But she somehow managed to be stronger than your average high-class devil in combat power. It was actually a little insane. I like her, she might be even better than the girl that Ria's got for her rook spot. Hey Yor, you passed all the tests, want to sit down and talk peacefully now? Naruto asked Yor as he looked around for her. She was inhuman with her speed, but he could still track her movements with his eyes if he paid attention to her. She punched and kicked the barrier with enough force to crack it, but she wasn't breaking the barrier completely. Yor stopped her fist short in front of the barrier before she backed up. "Hey? All your friends aren't hurt, they are just asleep, actually, I'm just here to talk to you, come, let's go, Roygun, you can drop the barrier, I'm sure that Yor doesn't want to fight if we can solve things peacefully." Naruto urged his queen to drop the barrier, she nodded her head and obeyed his order, and when Yor didn't attack, Naruto could tell that he judged her character correctly. Yor was so confused, but she was willing to talk peacefully. -4 hours later. "And my family will provide your brother with the best education possible, all paid for by me, you'll be expected to obey me, I mean I will own you, but you're free to do whatever you want, travel wherever you want, and kill whoever you want to kill, as long as it doesn't come back to bite me, and as long as you always come when I call for you." Naruto stated as he showed a contract he had made for Yor. Yor was reading it. Yor didn't understand it. "Ooh. In exchange for me owning you as my property, your little brother will be given chances he would never have otherwise, also, you can put killing for pay behind you, and put your strength to better use in a fighting sport." Naruto wasn't shy with the fact he would own her as his literal property. "I own Roygun here, and she doesn't seem to have a problem with it." "Well, you own me in name only, I am still a high-class devil myself, so I do have freedom." "Bark." "Woof," Roygun barked when he told her to bark, her barking got a laugh from Yor, who didn't understand the contract, but she could at least understand that it would be good for her family if she accepted it. The way Roygun barked in such a way did imply that she wasn't angry at the order or anything. "So, I sell my soul." "Not your soul, I don't need that, you can keep that, but I do want the right to your body as my slave, in exchange for that, your brother will be promised a successful life, also, you get to fight for my sake," Naruto stated. Yor crossed her arms and tilted her head. "Do I have to accept?" "You can refuse if you want, there are 7 billion humans on this world, I will bet if I look hard enough, I can replace you, I want you, but you do have the right to refuse, and I'll just find somebody else." Naruto didn't pretend that she was somebody he couldn't replace either, she was a human with potential, and a lot of it. But he didn't want her to get some big head and think that she could dictate any terms to him. "Okay, where do I sign, how does this go?" Yor asked. Naruto raised his hand up and pointed it at her like a gun. "This is your final test, now that you've accepted, don't flinch, I'm going to murder you, and I need you to trust that I'll bring you back to life," Naruto told her, he wanted all of his pieces to have unconditional trust that he would keep his word. A small yellow ball appeared at the tip of his finger, pure magical energy. Yor looked at it without flinching. She grunted in pain when Naruto shot a beam that went through her chest, piercing her heart and coming out of her back. Roygun did flinch when black markings spread across Yor's body, and the curse killed her instantly, her life was ripped from her body, and she collapsed to the ground with dull eyes. "I hated when you did that to me." Roygun remembered the horrible painful feeling that came with the curse taking effect. "Why did you even make a cursed magic like that?" Roygun did not understand it. "Why would you make a magic that cursed people with death when you shot them through the heart, when piercing the heart would kill most living creatures anyway?" At that point, the curse itself was kind of pointless, since you already killed the one you were cursing. "You did? Oh, you might have a cute face and a lovely smile, you can be a real sadist with your tests." Roygun kind of flirted with him. He ignored that. "Did she flinch?" Naruto asked as he looked at the corpse. "No, she didn't flinch, she trusts you, but she did gasp in pain, which isn't really a flinch, more of a reaction to pain." Roygun believed that with that, Yor passed the final test, still, she was already strong enough to crack magic barriers as a human. "I don't want to feel her punch when she becomes a rook. Don't want those old bones to crack." Naruto joked with her. She punched the top of his head. "I'm only over 100, your dad is older than me." "Dang, over 100 and still an unmarried virgin." Naruto could feel blood getting on his foot. "Okay, all jokes aside, I guess I shouldn't leave her dead for much longer." Naruto clapped his hands together. "Time to revive the dead." Thanks for watching.